I unfortunately had, Cheryl, I had continuing problems with the information, so I am going to try to, I wound up having to get it from the town website, which if you'll give me 1 second.
Sure.
Let me shrink everything here. I think if we could, guys, have you all had a chance to look at the minutes? I think we owe Cheryl July. I looked at them and I'm fine. I know, Crystal, you were not here. Nor was MJ. Oh, hi, MJ.
Excuse me, Mark, have we officially started the meeting?
Yes, ma'am. I think so.
Okay. Gotcha.
So my question is, did everybody have a chance to look at the July minutes?
I did.
Yep.
All right, so can I have a motion to approve?
So move.
A
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, July and September, we did not have an August meeting, so September, Lou was absent, and I did call him earlier. I spoke to him about 15 minutes ago and gave him all the information, so you never know. He may join via phone, but we'll see about that. September minutes, I was fine with also. Did everybody have a chance to look at those?
I did.
Yep.
Okay, so I can have a motion
So move.
and a
I'll
second, and all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're good. And then the last one is October again. Crystal, I know you were absent then also. Everybody have a chance to look? Can I have a motion
And so move.
and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so October is done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. So let's see. Agenda. We have, I think the referrals we should just push off to the end. And this meeting, I believe, is going to go long. So I think we're going to say we're going to go an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours max, and call it quits. And whatever we don't finish, we push over to next month. So can we keep going with Wildrick? That's James. Are you out there?
Yeah, I'm just looking for James. I have the Wildricks.
Yeah, the Wildricks are here.
Hi, guys. Do you want to wait until James is present or joins the meeting?
Yeah, he should be here any moment now. Oh, it says D George just said I'm
Yeah.
here. She's not seeing my control. So maybe D
you-
didn't get let in or something.
I think I'm in. That might be James.
Or whatever.
All right. So let me quick pull up the.
Yeah, I think
Hi.
James signed
that?
in with my link.
There
Hi,
he is.
James.
This is James pretending to be D. Sorry, I'm on my iPad and it's it's a first for me.
Okay. So James, you want to fill us in on whatever you have that is new from the last time I saw I have to throw out one more time. I know, James, you said you felt that there was a maybe more of a consensus on the pool at the prior meeting, and you were surprised by my statement about the precedent being set and that being sort of high on my agenda. But I will reiterate that I still feel that the pool is a problem, regardless of if it's a natural pool or not. And Max actually made a very interesting suggestion to me a couple of weeks ago, and it related to eelgrass. We have not touched on the idea of maybe mitigating the river itself. And we had said that there's not a lot of space. There's no place to mitigate on the property, really, not a lot. I saw in your the application you've added. Well, I didn't look at it carefully. It looked like a rain garden or some plantings and so on. But Max, would you elaborate on that eelgrass thought, please?
Yeah, it was just a kind of a comment regarding potentially doing some sort of mitigatory plantings or some sort of restoration component to the overall, in addition to the overall development of the parcel, to offset some of the impacts I think maybe taking a step back too. I don't know, Mark, if you had a chance to speak with the other members who were able to go out onto the site to do an additional site visit to kind of get some of their feedback as well in regards to what's being proposed.
I have not,
specifically
but I would love
so
to
that
hear.
might be as well. Yeah.
So who, can you guys, anybody who got out there, would you mind chiming in?
Bob and I were both out there.
Right.
I don't know whether you have anything that you want to share, Bob.
Well, I mean, we were out there, and thank you very much for making the arrangements for a second visit, even though the board came out one time before that. I'm focused on this mitigation as it's something that's fit for purpose, something that based on the potential impact to the area, given its current situation, we try, like as Jan had said in the past, we try to make it better, improve it, and compensate for the changes that the homeowners are making. In this case, it's a pool. It's on that little end of the peninsula. It's a big area when there's a lot of water already in the area, but you want a pool there. So I understand that. I think that, the focus that it's a natural pool. We're using in this case, the sand biofilter. So there won't be chlorine there. James, at the site visit, you pointed out how clearly the small volume of clean water that's going to go back into the Hudson is, kind of not even a drop, not even neglectable in regards to how much water is in the Hudson. And that's completely understandable. I think the focus areas of mitigation that I'd like to see is like plantings along that pool area, kind of natural plantings, kind of mitigate like water flow, kind of the runoff from the property in that area, give a corridor for creatures to move around. Again, with the seawall, I'm not sure how much of a corridor that is, but obviously the seawall is a barrier right there. And that's, obviously on the board's agenda as well. I think the biggest problem I have with the pool is like, what happens if it floods? So we have a Sandy event and the pool is displaced, which obviously is not an impact to the Hudson, but the Hudson impacted the pool and maybe put creatures in there, wildlife, fish, all kinds of, bacteria from the Hudson. How do you decontaminate it? Things like that. So just kind of like a narrative, how you would go about a catastrophe, how would you handle it in a catastrophic situation like that? How do you empty the pool, decon the pool? Just what do you do with that the decon fluids? You let it sit for, a week after you chlorinate it and then release it to the Hudson. Just kind of have that detail there. And I think I'm a little bit more comfortable with the pool than initially, if we can kind of go to that level of detail.
I would be glad to speak to that. And I think it's a fascinating kind of exploration of potential outcomes. The intent for the pool is, for example, whether it's, a flooding event like you had outlined, or potentially, something goes wrong with the filtering process, right? And so that, that it needs to be, conventionally it would be shocked, right? But they have methodologies in the bio natural pools to bring it back in line, and they would basically recultivate the enzymes to make it work. So they would never actually use chlorine to shock the pool. And I think yes, the Hudson has issues, but it's not, we're not talking about 3 Mile Island here.
No.
Getting, and get it. I am a kayaker, as probably you all know. I do not identify the pool as the problem. I identify what we do, or the Hudson as the problem. I identify what we do to the Hudson as the problem.
I just did too. It's gonna go into your pool.
Yeah. So, but I think what we can do, I am, I am not the pool expert, but I did have quite a few conversations with them, that they would have a process of restarting the activity of the enzymes to basically have it get back into the natural balance of ecology. So it's not like I don't see that as a catastrophic event. I think that would be something that would be manageable. And what I've been advising the Wildricks is to keep the pool level high, close to the same height as the finished floor of the house, so that, ideally and we had a subsequent conversation actually after this last meeting of possibly raising it another 6 inches. So we're about a foot above the flood height of Sandy. So if the pool is about that same height, chances are that we're most likely going to be okay in foreseeable events. Obviously, climate change is real, sea level rise is real, but I don't see this as something that won't be manageable in a 100-year flood event.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable at some point. It's likely to happen. It's happened in the past, at that level. So, that was my concern of like, oh, what happens like when the fish get washed in there and the sewage from the, and every storm like that, you always hear of high bacterial fecal counts, and that's going to be going in there, and you're going to have to decontaminate that pool for you let that cute little kid go in there. So we just definitely want to make sure we have a process for that.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that the people that who would be in contract to maintain it would be able to bring it back online without chemicals.
MJ, you said you went down as well?
I did. And I will say that I am not as adamantly opposed to the pool as I was before I went down and, visited and had a chance to talk with the Wildricks and James in more detail about, and James's colleague about the pool and how it's designed and kind of the elevation it was great to kind of see how that elevation issue is being handled on the site. My issue, and this really does not have anything to do with the Wildricks, it has to do with the fact that the Wildricks may decide that they want to sell this property at some point. And I just want to make sure that the town has, that we can put in some sort of assurance that this pool is not going to become a chlorinated pool someday, right? So if we're serious about these kinds of green and passive house structures and green, like green eco pools being, kind of the norm here, and we're going to give folks those opportunities to maybe, give them a little more latitude because they're building green. I want to make sure that when they move on, that we have some sort of teeth in how something like a pool at the side of the river would be maintained by a new owner.
Thanks, MJ. I think the idea of the deeded maintenance agreement and all that sort of stuff, that can be, the fact that it would never be a chlorinated pool could be worked into that easy enough.
I'd like to see that if that's the case. I'm not against the pool at this point. I'm really not. But I do want to make sure that it maintains the integrity that I know the Wildricks want to build into this design. I want to make sure that the next owner and the next owner after that are held to the same standard. And we have a bad reputation in Philipstown for that kind of enforcement. So I just want to make sure that we're building that in.
Yep.
I'm vigorously nodding my head. I applaud that because it's also my integrity as well. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, MJ, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one of the most important things about this project. I really regard it as an incredible, on the one hand, an incredible show place for Philipstown. But that's based on it being done correctly. And your point, I think, is really as important for the future as what we're looking at today. And I think the maintenance agreement is really the key to it. Mark circulated a terrific template of the maintenance agreement that Dobbs Ferry uses. I volunteered to mark that up for the board, not with specific reference to the Wildrick house, but as a template that we could start working off of for this and future projects. Because getting 1 year immediate current approval is really increasingly not going to be the problem for us. It's going to be follow through, continued compliance by the homeowner while they own it on all these projects. And to your point, continued compliance should it be sold. And I think, as a board, we've been sort of working our way through this little by little. And I think we're reaching a rough general consensus on the theory of it, and we just have to fill in the details. So I agree, subject to all of these things. I have no hesitation about the pool. In fact, even though I regard myself as a naysayer on anything within the buffer zone, I'd like the opportunity to approve a pool for every lot up and down the road if it were built this way with all of these features and remediation, which of course isn't going to happen. But I think this is an example of how people can do stuff and do it the right way in a responsible way that's good for them and good for the community.
I have to say, guys, I think we're going down a different road here, which I think is a precedent in itself, and I think a good one. I mean, as I said last meeting, the idea that, building a passive house is so environmentally beneficial that you have to look at the broader picture. So to what degree do we give credence or give weight to, say, the pool over between the wetland and the, where was that, Lane Gate? I don't even remember where it was, where they were going to do $75,000 worth of remediation between the pool and the well, between the lake and the wetland. So their focus was strictly on plantings and so on. Whereas this one, because of the criteria that the lot doesn't permit the other approach, just by happenstance, James has created this amazing house, which is giving us all these other benefits. So if you get if that other applicant on Avery Road were to come back in and say, I want to put my pool where we wanted it. It's going to be 20 feet from the stream, but I'm going to convert this house. I'm going to knock it down. I'm going to build a passive house here. Does that now entitle them to put a pool 10 feet from the stream?
I think the concept has to be, Mark, like it has to be fit for purpose. The mitigations have to be fit for the purpose. Like in the one case where a pool was going to be placed, within a double buffer area, we asked directly for extensive, wetlands plantings and removal of lawned area, and they were accommodating to that because they wanted the pool, and that was for the humans. And so we had to give something back, as Jana said. We want to leave it better than it was. So what was right in that case may not be right in every case. In this case, we have extensive mitigations here from the home where they're removing fossil fuels, other aspects of it. The pool itself is a mitigation because it's cleaner than the Hudson, the water that would run back in there. It is an engineering solution, so it has to be maintained, but so I think every example that comes before us has to be kind of looked at as like, are what they're proposing fit for what mitigations or that they're proposing for what they're trying to get out of that. And I think with that kind of concept, it can work for a lot of different properties, but
I
you
really-
can't, like, set a precedent like that.
I don't disagree. This is really kind of hyperbolic, and I'm only throwing it out there as like just a hypothetical to understand how we all feel about. I mean, James came in, he's going to build a passive house no matter what. And you know, if I could build the houses he builds, I would be a happier man. But you get another client that comes in and says, I'm not going to do any kind of mitigation, but guess what? I'm going to build, James is building me a passive house. This thing is amazing. Do they get the same, you know, just because they have done everything that has been done on this site, and they say that there's nothing more that we can really do. We have no place else to put the pool. It's got to be 10 feet from the stream, like that property on Avery. Would we approve that? Because, you know, those people may see this meeting and turn around and say, well, all right, well, I'm going to convert my house completely to electric. I'm going to have panels on the roof. It's going to be net zero. And so on and so forth. I'm just curious. I'm just throwing it out.
In a case like that, I mean, in a case, and this is just simply my opinion, in a case like that, you know, a hypothetical case where instead of, you know, this being the Hudson with trillions of gallons, you had a small stream running past this pool, you know, right here, and lots of
Really good
wildlife
point.
that use that stream, and lots of wildlife that come back and forth, and
Yep.
you know, that's a completely different situation. You know, like here you have a fairly sterile environment. It doesn't have any existing corridor because it's been populated for, you know, 100 years or whatever, how long it's been built on this property, these properties here. You know, this area is mostly extended, you know, artificially out into the Hudson here. It's all barrier built up, and there's not an easy, you know, pass that currently today wildlife cross through here, and you know, like, it's a completely different situation. So that's why I mean the fit for purpose type of analysis, which, you know, certainly in my industry we do it. I know in a lot of industries they use that same terminology, you know, for fit for purpose mitigation, especially in this type of environmental type of mitigation. So you know, again, that would be a different situation. So yeah, maybe you put a passive house next to a stream, but it still doesn't mitigate the fact that you're impacting that stream.
Well said.
Can I weigh in?
Excellent.
Can I weigh in? You know, I've been on what was the wetland committee and so on, eventually the conservation board, for over 25 years. I think I've only dissented once against the entire committee before, but I truly believe we are setting a bad precedent here, because on the whole, we don't allow a non-mandatory structure or engineering change in a wetland or a wetland buffer unless there's significant mitigation. And while I think the house, the way it's designed, the passive house, is wonderful, we should almost be requiring that on anything that is being built entirely within a floodplain. So, you know, I know I'm going to lose on this, and so be it. But in my conscience, I can't vote for this. I think we're setting a very bad precedent. And I'm also sort of uncomfortable of everybody looking at the Hudson. It's like dirty. Yeah, the Hudson has industry on it, but it's one of the most amazing drainages in the world. And 10% or more of all flora and fauna that exists in the continental United States exists within the Hudson River drainage, whether it's been native, introduced, or invasive. So that's just my point. So, and I do, you know, if the board wants to vote for it, I'm not going to fight against it, but I just, in my conscience, I have to vote against it. I just don't think it's the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
I mean, I don't think I mean that the Hudson is dirty from the standpoint of that, you know, okay, it you know, doesn't need to be mitigated. It obviously isn't going to be as clean as the purified water in the very tiny microscopic pool in comparison to the huge volume of the Hudson. That's the only thing I meant there, Andy. You know, like obviously, when there's sewage discharged into the Hudson during a catastrophic event and things like that, that's not the norm. That's when the towns have to emergency release, and that's unfortunate that they don't redesign those systems so that there is no emergency release. But that's not where we are today.
It's interesting. today I shared with a lot of elected officials the New York State DEC grant program that just made announcements to improve water structure, water quality along the Hudson River, and in improving the way we handle sewage and other deleterious improvements, let's call them, on the Hudson. I am absolutely an advocate for the Hudson River. I am not one to write it off. And I think that Andy, I hear your concerns, but what is the difference between a pool or a lawn of grass? There's, you know, a natural pool that's non-polluting and non-chemical versus an area of sterile grass. There's no difference. But at the same time, we have expanded the green roof to improve the habitat on the site. We've changed what was basically a drainage trench to a bioswale to improve both diversity and water quality. So these are improvements that came out of this discussion. So it's not that this has been one-sided and asking only for you know, the luxury of having a swimming pool. So we're trying to improve habitat where there's none right now. And so I don't see it as a selfish grab and something that's really just putting the Hudson at risk and disparaging it.
Thanks, James. I agree with Bob's premise of the relationship between the pool and a stream and the pool and Hudson. It makes us, obviously, as you said, each case is different. And I personally don't, as I said before, and MJ, you kind of jumped in and said, well, I mean, I sort of said that it wouldn't be a bad thing for all the roof runoff, and if the pool overflows into the Hudson. I mean, I kayak that all the time, and what's coming off that piece of property is cleaner than what I'm paddling in. But like you said, it's our job to protect every bit of it, and we should be trying to make sure that nothing but clean water goes in there. So, I mean, I get it. My personal feeling is that the pool is not going to impact the river. What my problem is our position on the board with this precedent. So if you guys are all okay with the precedent, and maybe we make it clear in our approvals that what we have taken, be very specific with and list them all out, the things that we feel have been offered up as mitigations from the natural, from the swales and so on to the passive house and all the details of that. And it should be written in to our approval so that somebody comes in later on and looks at it. They're not just going to say, well, you let him put a pool 10 feet from the river. Why can't I put a pool over here? Here you go. Just read the minutes and you'll understand better. We don't need to sit and explain it for 3 hours. So, I mean, I don't know.
Hey, Mark, not to interrupt you, but does the board feel like they completely understand what those mitigations are and what's currently proposed?
Can we
Do you
roll
have
through
enough
them?
to evaluate what they're proposing against the plans they provided? I mean, we've had these discussions, but I think that could be clarified.
That would be great.
Sorry.
I think that would be very helpful to have them enumerated for us again.
How about we don't do that in this discussion? How about we ask James to kind of just make a list for us? Because we have a lot on our agenda, I think. Is there anything else with this application that anybody had? Jason, yes, sir.
No, I'm just kind of reiterating the point for a later discussion as a relatively new conservation board participant that, you know, from that October discussion, what I walked away with was this discussion about what a mitigation is defined as by the conservation board and whether or not a mitigation can be defined more broadly for a number of things that we all know are critical to improve the environment. And so without going into it here, it sounds like, Mark, what you're saying is there's a reason to list all of those various mitigations with this decision because it expands the types of mitigations that the conservation board is using to make decisions, and it kind of increases the tools in the toolbox to kind of encourage new developments to use some of these things that go beyond plantings, but that are incredibly important for our environmental future. So that was my big takeaway from the October meeting, that this is an incredibly important discussion for the role of the Conservation Board in terms of expanding the tools that it has. But that's it.
Thanks, Jace.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Crystal, you want to chime in? I'm curious.
No, so for me, I'm like, if we leave things better than what they were before, to me, that's the most important thing. You know, let's either keep it neutral or do better. I definitely don't want to set any precedent that people can just build, you know, pools in the buffer if they do, you know, XYZ. I do think that it's important for us, like you said, to list out, these are the reasons exactly why we're approving this. And I want to see how we can keep track of all of these things that we approve so we can check up, you know, to make sure that it is in fact what we approved. So like, that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, if it can be better or about the same, you know, that's the most important thing, I think. And
Great.
I seem pretty happy with what I've seen so far.
Okay.
I just would say one thing, Mark, before we end, you know, like, I think I want to get away from this concept of that anything we do sets a precedent, because I think what we have to look at is what's put in front of us, given the situation that's at hand. And there's, you know, tangible damage that can occur based on certain designs in certain areas, and less damage, you know, that can occur in other situations. And I think, you know, unfortunately, we have to kind of weigh that, and it's not going to be perfect or 100%, but like, I just think that's the reality of the situation. Nobody, I think, on this board would even want a house built there if we could, you know, have that happen, and that whole area would then not be, you know, buildable anymore. But that's not, you know, the situation we're in. There's town laws and other boards involved, and, you know, but so what's before us is how do we make it, you know, neutral or better, hopefully better. And I think, you know, given the circumstances, we just have to look at whatever situation in front of us, whether it's the Hudson River with 1 trillion gallons or a small little stream that, you know, trickles, you know, every spring, maybe. Completely different situation and different impact. So.
Yep. All right. Well, I don't know what our next step is. Are we being asked to issue a permit at this point, or approvals, or is this is still preliminary? We don't have a final plan yet, correct?
Well, our goal is, you know, what we're offering is hopefully a final plan for you. We've been responding to questions and trying to get to resolution here.
Very good. What's
And
the rest
are we
of the board
holding
feeling
anything
on
up? Is there something that we're holding up, or do you have other approvals and other things that need to be taken care of before, so that there's still time so we could kind of get a letter back from you guys or whatever?
We're concurrently in front of the planning board as well. So we've got zoning approval. So we've got planning board that we're working on pretty much simultaneously. So we're close to hopefully getting done here. I do want to introduce Asia, who's from Race Engineering, who's designing the seawall. And there were some questions previously about the seawall. So I think, this is a good opportunity to speak to her as well, if you don't mind.
Does anybody, is anybody very curious about that part of the discussion? It seemed to me when I read through, it was mostly technical and Army Corps type stuff directed at DEC and so on. If somebody has direct questions about that, then let's listen. Otherwise, we need to keep going. It's 8 o'clock already.
It's the
I think
same
the last
as
time we
the
had a
seawall that
narrative-
you've already got on the side, right? I mean, it's going to be, the construction is essentially going to be similar to that?
That's correct. Yes, replacing the deteriorated gabion wall with precast concrete blocks similar to what's on 30 Hudson River Lane.
There was a question previously, I believe Andy had raised it about the process in building it, since we'll have the sheet piling temporary wall in place, is it possible or preferable to do the work from the water versus doing the work from the land? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that was it.
It's certainly from a construction efficiency standpoint, better to do it from the land. Bringing in materials and equipment and doing work from the water is certainly more difficult to do and expensive. So it's not ideal. I wouldn't want to preclude one way or the other if it's a tight area to get up and down the street. Depending on where the blocks are coming from, they may want to barge them in and do that work from a barge. It's generally, again, more expensive and less efficient. So I think the preference for any contractor, and certainly, from my perspective as an engineer with a lot of experience doing waterfront work, that if the timing is right to do the wall, while the houses are down and prior to, the construction of the new foundations and so forth, that it would be best to do the walls by land.
Adrian, can you speak to the ideas of some restorative planting, say eelgrass and things as part of the seawall work?
It's nothing that we've raised in particular as considered thus far. It hasn't been something required or requested by DEC or the Army Corps. It's certainly something that we can look at. That kind of vegetation, as you all know, and Max knows, there are certain types of vegetation that grow in certain areas and elevations. So we'd have to look at what would be viable, perhaps, the area of the beach that's between the two properties, straddles the property line. Perhaps something could be planted there. Eelgrass is typically something that is, underwater. Most of the time it's submerged aquatic vegetation. So again, if we have the right conditions just offshore of the new wall, or again, in that area between the walls, the little cove, it's something that certainly could be considered.
Thanks.
Max, just because I'm not aware, what would that benefit be to do that?
Well, it was more of an idea just to look at improving aquatic habitat outside of the upland areas that they're manipulating. Eelgrass is a species of vegetation, submerged aquatic vegetation that's been in decline, that provides habitat for certain aquatic organisms and also can filter river water or seawater. So there's some benefits there, and there's been a lot of conservation initiatives to replant areas where it's gotten basically removed in the past due to water quality degradation. So it's more of a concept or an idea in terms of looking at the project as a whole and looking at those mitigatory measures that we're talking about. Is it something that is completely necessary? I don't know. That's why I want the board to be able to look at and evaluate what has been discussed over the last few meetings and compare it to what's being proposed on the site. Again, in terms of voting on an application tonight, I don't think you guys are there yet. I don't want to jump the gun. The planning board's still involved, so the seeker process is still open. So again, we wouldn't be able to issue a permit or give you a conditional approval until they close and make their determination of significance on the project. So, there's a lot that's been discussed, and it needs to be laid out. In those final plans, I think we still are, lacking a construction narrative, looking at the environmental protections that will be in place during construction. I think that's a huge portion of this project. And what's being proposed to make sure that the site is segregated from the regulated resource during construction. And then once the site's stable, until the site's stabilized. So a lot of those things we still need before we can issue a permit.
So Max, if I hear you correctly, then you're requesting sorry, now the words are escaping me as soon as I start to speak them. Basically, a mitigation plan and stormwater protection plan for the site.
Yeah, and even a general construction narrative and where you're placing silt fence if it's going to be required, where you're going to put in your dams, where you're going to all those things, turbidity curtains. Those from a bird's eye perspective on all phases of the project, if you can lay that out in a plan, that is really, I think, what the board requires to evaluate the overall impact on the site. Plus, obviously everything that we've discussed in the meetings in terms of mitigation, I think, so that the board can see, hey, look, you have this green development project. It's going to provide all of these benefits, plus the swale, plus the planting, like all in one place, so that we can evaluate and look at, okay, now we're comfortable with XYZ components of the project because all of this now is on record as being done. I think that'd be a pretty thing to have at the next.
We'll be
meeting.
glad to. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think another thing that I don't want to forget, which will certainly be in the narrative, bird safe glass is another benefit that has come out of this discussion. That wasn't part of our plan before we started talking about the pool. So that's a mitigation factor that may not be about water, but that's certainly an improvement on the overall site.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those are all points that should be highlighted, for the board.
Great.
I don't want them to get lost in the shuffle.
Great.
All right. Thank you, James.
Sure. I know you got a long night, but thank you all. I think this was very productive.
All right. Thank you very much.
Guys.
Good night.
Night.
Good discussion.
Cheryl, you said there was Matt had a question?
Yeah, I just changed so he can talk if he wants to ask his question. Matt, did you have a question?
All right. Well, if it comes back up, we can jump back to it. Okay, so let's go to Lake Surprise and update. Max, do you have a quick summary of this one, or do we need to go through the whole?
If you can let, I think Rich Williams in, he's their representative on the project. But yeah, in general, if the board can recall, we had stopped work. They had been on this project, I don't know how long ago, maybe over a year. And due to the fact that they were not in compliance with the stormwater infrastructure they were installing on their property. At that point, they were talking about, looking at, and Rich can step in here at any point too, but they were looking at, we were requiring having them obtain DEC permits to establish a stream crossing that the board felt would be environmentally sensitive, or work for an environmentally sensitive area. So I believe
Max,
those permits are.
The stop work, I apologize for interrupting. The stop work was because of that road that they cut through the woods on the other side, or was relative to the actual permitted work?
It was, they had gotten approvals to do stormwater improvements in that area, and then kind of had one of their contractors divert away from what was permitted in their plans. Then in one of my inspections, I noticed that they weren't following what was submitted to the town. And then Ron and I came back out, talked to Rich, and kind of were trying to basically bring the applicant back into compliance, essentially, after they violated the.
This was the first part where on the, as you come in by the little toll booth, everything, all that stuff
Yeah.
on the right. This has nothing to do with that road that they cut up the hill. Meander.
No, no.
Okay, I recall.
I don't know,
Alright.
Rich, do you want to fill in on, I guess, kind of bring us back up to speed? I with the stream crossing and making a hardened surface for campers to use to get across that stream there.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. Rich Williams, Insight Engineering. I'm joined by my colleague, Justin Russo. I saw that Matt Grosshandler was temporarily let in the meeting. He is with Surprise Lake Camp, as is Cheryl Kirschenbaum, if they're in the waiting rooms. It might be appropriate to let them join in as well. If the board would like, I'll share my screen. I'll do a quick recap because it sounds like you have a busy night, and then I will answer as many questions as you have. So I am going to just jump back real quick. I know most of the board was members at the time, but it looks like there are a few new members. Surprise Lake Camp is on Lake Surprise. It is an over 400-acre piece of property in the northwest portion of the town. And we had come before you through 2017, 2018, 2019 to seek approval for 2 separate improvements, which we permitted as a single project. This is that toll booth that was just referred to. This is the lake. This is the existing main camp infrastructure, main camp building. There's a lower access road that came to the back of the main buildings. And then there's an upper access road that comes to the front of the buildings, which also serves as the main parking lot. When we came before you in circa 2018, we had sought to widen the lower access road and create a turnaround at the end of it to allow for deliveries, drop-offs, pickups, and also camper drop-off and pickup. And that was all done with the intent of improving the lakeside portion of the main camp building for safety, environmental improvements, as well as improve the aesthetics of the camp. What happens now is the main pedestrian area for the campers, their walkway to the dining hall, to the main camp facilities, to the library, to the main offices, coincides with the main parking lot, which all sits right here. So in 2018, what we had done was, again, widen this lower access road and create a turnaround to divert all of the local deliveries that come into the camp property, as well as to be able to do camper drop off and pickup at the beginning and end of each session. We'd also separated out a visitor parking area. So again, what we could create in here, right, the main entrance to the camp building was a more pedestrian-centric area to create safety for campers. At the time, the only permit that we needed from your board was for the improvements along Lakeside here. And these improvements consisted of adding stepped seating in order along an existing eroding slope to help stabilize the slope, but to also create an amphitheater effect for the campers to collect in the morning and congregate. This had slight wetland disturbance in this portion of the property. And as mitigation for that, we had done a series of plantings and seeding mixes along the lake. We'd also done stormwater improvements here for the change in impervious surface, created other stormwater improvements at other discharge points, as well as other mitigation plantings in this area as well. We begun construction of those improvements. And again, this match line here on the right side of my page ties into this match line here. This is that continuation of the lower access road to the toll booth that was referred to by the chairman. We'd begun construction of this lower access road, and that is going to now bring me to the plan that was submitted to you. In beginning the widening of the lower access road and that construction was completed, the contractor, instead of piping the stormwater down to this existing pipe, rerouted it and piped directly into a water course that flows here. This is also an existing access trail that gets to the tennis courts on the other side of the stream. Once, and Max is correct, once he did his inspection and saw the wetland violation and we had our stop work order issued, we worked with Max and Ron to create a series of improvements to help stabilize and improve this area as a whole. not just take the stormwater and discharge it to this portion of the property. We're going to be adding a water bar at the top of this access drive to help prevent water from creating further erosion. There was an existing eroded gully here that's going to get filled in that had been present. There was an existing driveway culvert crossing that's going to remain, but we're going to stabilize that existing swale or ditch that had continued to erode. And there were a series of pipes that created the existing trail crossing that had been washed out numerous times and been replaced. And we're going to be replacing that with an open arch system, so as to not have any disturbance to the actual stream bed and to reestablish a natural stream bed. We were before you for this stop work order. I'm just going to stop my share for a second. In the summer of 2019, we had 3 or 4 meetings with this board. I think it was June, July, August. We may have done our initial submission in May. And our last meeting before you was in October of 2019, at which point this board was finally satisfied with this plan. And it was incumbent on us to go to the New York State DEC to get the stream disturbance permit for this crossing. And what we had said at that time was, depending on how fast we get that permit, we would be able to work with Max and just get started, or if a significant amount of time passes, we should just come back and remind the board of what's transpired, let you know that we're ready to start work, and come before you and tell you that we have the DEC permit. So that's what we're here to do tonight. It took longer than we would have hoped. I will tell you that COVID certainly played a part, and I know the COVID excuse almost sounds old at this point, but I was talking to one of my colleagues. It was actually December of 2019 when COVID really started and began the year-long process that we went through to get this permit. So we finally have DEC sign off. They've agreed as part of the stream disturbance permit to our timber rattlesnake education and encounter plan to make sure that we don't impact the timber rattlesnake, which this camp is very familiar with dealing with. And we also had our timber rattlesnake monitors on site for the lower access road. But our goal tonight is just to remind the board of this plan, and hopefully you'll let Max continue to work with us to finally get these improvements finished.
Thank you very much. Max, do you have a full grasp on this? Honestly, this is so long ago, I just don't remember all the details of what we thought were a good idea and so on. It seems to represent everything we talked about in essence, that whatever you called that element at the top of the road, which stops water from running down the top of that road, all the way down where they put the pipe. That sounds like a great thing. Weren't we discussing what was going to happen at the point where the triangle is, where that riprap pile is in the center? There are 2 pipes that run down over that old existing swale to the north. No, that center one. There was some discussion, if I recall, about how that was going to be treated, because it would run out there, would run along that existing swale and eventually go under the existing culvert that goes back into the riprap that runs down to what's going to be the bridge. Is that correct? That's all still the same, right?
You do remember. So this is the last plan that you did see and sign off on. And to your point, we had spent some time talking about this area, and the way the water works is it discharges from these pipes. We're actually going to be constructing a swale here that will flow from left to right. We're going to be
you're not screen sharing anymore?
I'm sorry.
No worries. I think I knew exactly where you meant, so we're good.
We're meeting back in person a lot. My Zoom's getting rusty. So we have our discharge point here, which will flow up page. We had talked about this board at a couple of meetings, and the result of that was to construct a swale that's moving from left page to right page. Within that swale, we'll be constructing stone check dams, which are permanent, and that's going to help slow that flow of water down and help promote infiltration. We are going to add end sections to the end of this existing pipe that goes under this access road. And then from here down, the direction at the time was to stabilize this existing channel, because it is steep and it is continually eroding with riprap, which is all still part of the plan.
Yep. And then the bridge itself, the only thing, as I recall, Max, you should lead me here a little bit, but there's there's no stream diversion necessary, or what's going to be done to prevent sedimentation while those footings are poured? Is this a monolithic concrete thing that's dropped in place or poured?
No, so the footings will be poured in place. We've purposefully set them back. We do have notes that discuss this, and we had to detail it for New York State DEC, where we're going to sandbag and create a coffer dam along the stream channel.
Yep.
We're going to then work back in the embankment, get the footings poured, and then we can set the bridge and work.
Got it.
We'll also be adding a turbidity curtain at the end of this eroded channel, just to help protect it while we're stabilizing it.
All makes sense to my simple mind. What do you think, Max?
Yeah, no, I think the only other thing that I seem to recall, and Rich, maybe you can bring us up to speed on that. Did we have any discussions about like restoration plantings at the area where you were talking about putting in the stone check dams? I vaguely recall something like that, but I don't remember where. But everything else sounds great. I mean, it sounds like, you know,
we actually
what we need.
We didn't talk about plantings down where we encounter the stream. If everybody remembers, it's essentially a almost vertical ditch that's cut into the ground just from erosion, and is essentially in item 4 rock and gravel situation that just keeps washing into the stream.
Rich, I think if what Max was referring to is along the swale that you're going to build, where you said there's a series of permanent stone. Am I right, Max?
Yeah, and I think the other piece was to make sure that your maintenance staff that they have at the camp understands completely what's necessary to make sure all the stormwater features are functioning correctly, and including that ultimately in some sort of a document we can hand to them to make sure, you know, this is the time of year they should be mowing if it's necessary, or removing sediment at this rate, or, you know, so that it makes sense to them. I think that there was some confusion from some folks that when we had met on site, just to make sure that everybody was up to speed in that capacity too.
Yep. On the swale, we had landed, and it's shown on our drawings, using one of the urn mixes. The native steep slopes mix was the mix that we had reviewed at the time, and that's still part of the drawing. On the maintenance agreement, we're actually going to have to file, I believe, a maintenance agreement with the town of Philipstown, because we exceeded the thresholds for post-construction stormwater control under the DEC Speedies general permit. So Max, I think ultimately by the time we're done with this, there'll be a maintenance agreement that gets filed with the town in order to close our coverage under the NOI.
Yeah, no, totally. I think what we had requested was that when that is developed, it's not just solely reviewed by Ron, but also by the staff at the camp, so that they can actually facilitate it correctly.
Okay. Matt's here, and Cheryl, and they are the two people at the camp that would be responsible for doing that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other than that, there's no open wetlands permit essentially for this portion of the project, right? So we would have to, we'll basically, I'll draft one. I'll have to look back at the file, and then I don't see an issue with you guys voting to lift the stop work order and approve a permit to put the crossing in.
All right, sounds good, Max. Does anybody else have any comments on that? If not, then can I have a motion to approve the permit and I'll lift the stop? Yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask one quick question? Wasn't there something about trees as also part of, I recall this project, wasn't there also a thing about a bunch of trees being cut down on this property?
That was the road that was cut up through the woods. It was
okay. So
whatever happened with that, Max?
I followed up with Parks, and I believe that Bradley had been talking with their biologist in regards to the restoration of some of those cut areas. But other than that, there hasn't been any updates. I mean, this is a separate, in all fairness, this is a separate instance of separate project, separate issue. Whether or not I guess it's up to this board to evaluate whether they feel like it's been fully rectified, or if they would like me to look back into that before you allow them to continue any other work on the property.
That's a good question for everybody, guys. Remember, I don't know how many of you walked that road that they cut, but it was a disaster. I mean, it was like somebody ran a bulldozer through the middle of the woods, up and down steep slopes. There was mud everywhere, big mature trees destroyed.
And through wetlands.
Yep. Is it worth it? This is the only thing, if there's I'm not trying to stay carrot and a stick, but should we at least know, Max, that something has been done or is underway or has been agreed to be done?
Yeah, I mean, if they can
Sorry, Max.
update the board and us formally, that would be great.
This is Matt Grossheimer. I'm one of the board members for Surprise Lake and a volunteer for the organization. And if we're talking about the area, I think it's up behind Unit H or Highlands, where there had been some tree removal that had been done. There was an arborist that had come in and made some recommendations on plantings. I believe there was some plantings that were restored before that, before the tree removal company was allowed to leave the site. I can confirm that that is in fact the case. I wasn't at the time part or parcel of the discussion. I heard about it after the fact, but I do understand or believe that a series of trees were planted in replacement of whatever had been taken down.
I have to say that based on your response, you probably did not walk that because you would not be taking it as lightly as it sounds like. It wasn't just a few trees removed. I mean, literally looked like a bulldozer was driven through the woods, a half a mile at least.
Yeah, they had a feller. Yeah, they had a feller buncher in there, which is major commercial harvesting. Max, we were in there with a few foresters from DEC because I believe the state owns the conservation easement on that section of the property.
Yeah.
I think it's a comment on the board that we hear from where the DEC is right now with what was done to the property or not.
To correct that point, I believe it's actually Husted Highlands that has the easement. I'm not sure it's DEC.
I believe the part we were looking at was New York State. Now, whether it's DEC or New York Parks, Recreation, Preservation, but I believe that was part of the state that was holding that, which is unusual. But either way, I think that we need to know that some type of remediation was done because it was horrific what was there.
And it's also been 2 years, so I really want to see what's been put in place.
Thank you, Crystal. That was a really good point to bring up. I agree wholeheartedly.
May
So,
I ask a question? Cheryl, Camp Director.
hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Acting Executive Director Bradley is no longer with us. And I think you make a valid point, Crystal. My question is, are the two things really related? The stop order that we had down where we were doing the work, I think is different than this. I'd like to respectfully ask that you look at them as two separate issues because we do have approval from the DEC who said we did what we needed to down below. I think we all want to do the right thing. I live there and I work there. I own a house also in Philipstown and I hear what you're saying and I want to look into it further, but I can assure you that some of the people involved in the decisions that had this occur are no longer at Surprise Lake Camp. So I'd ask you to consider that because in order to move forward for 2022 for the kids, I would like to fix that area down there. And I respect whatever your decision is. I just wanted to say that out loud and thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate your position. And that said, we should move expeditiously to find out exactly what's been done. And let's not drag this thing on. And I would say we often do a conditional permit where we all give our approval at this point based on the findings of what by Max and whoever else wants to go out there, whoever the appropriate people are to see what's going on. As long as something has been done, something has been decided on, and there is progress. But I can't in my heart say, just go ahead and keep going with whatever projects you want if you are ignoring such a disaster on your property. Well, the adjacent property, something that was caused by a prior person who thankfully is no longer there.
And that's
my opinion.
That's a very fair point and position. And if the board would be willing to do something conditional, the one other piece of the puzzle just to factor into this is one of the things DEC made us pay attention to is the timber rattlesnake. And the ideal time to get this work completed is prior to April 1st, when the timber rattlesnakes are hibernating.
What are your
that
thoughts,
doesn't-
Max?
Yeah, I mean, if you can just provide us with a report as to what, basically to bring us up to speed, that, what's transpired over the last 2 years with parks and the discussions you've had without the town, essentially in regards to the timber harvesting that happened and what was done to rectify it. I think that would be very helpful to just inform the board and bring us up to speed on that. I know that discussions have occurred without the town, and that's fine. But I think, being brought up to speed at this point, I think we can move forward, in my opinion, and then we can make an evaluation at that point.
What does the rest of the board think about that one?
I'd like to really hear what the mitigations were and what the result was. I mean, this project's been going on, as Richard pointed out, since 2017, which is kind of scary, but 2018, and now we had the multiple times where the board's been told of something that happened on the site that we weren't thinking about. So I just think we need to be a little bit more cautious about it. I definitely appreciate getting it done before the rattlesnake season. Hibernation is an issue, but I think if you can get a quick update of all the mitigations that were done and then come back to us in December, we can take care of it in December and you still have enough time to deal with it. But I really think that we need to have a pretty more comprehensive understanding of how that was remediated.
Thanks, Bob.
Is there also a value to us getting out there on the land? I think that's what Crystal had recommended. Did you say that, Crystal? I can't recall, but
I just want to verify that, something has been put in place, because it's been a long time.
Right. So does it make sense for us to get eyes on it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree.
Not to downplay anyone's concerns, because that's certainly not what I'm seeking to do. And I'm certainly not looking to downplay, this board needing to be cautious. I understand your position. But as I start to hear, site walks come back next month, I've been down this road, and with 20 years experience, know where this goes. We'll be before this board for several months is my concern. And while that may be fair, given the history, the one thing I would ask is, is there a way to condition us being able to continue with this portion while we're still before this board, if the board's not satisfied with the remediation? Because let's say you go out and you do a site walk and there's additional asks, and we come back and we address them and you have additional comments, and now we're into January. I'm not looking.
I understand.
I'm not looking for us to walk away, but I'm looking for us to work together.
I think it's in our best interest to say no, honestly. I don't see a time sensitive thing here. If we give you permission next December, it seems to me like you're still in good shape. Is that not the case? Would you still be able to meet your timelines?
I don't know what Winter's going to do yet.
Yeah, Mark, respectfully, I'm not 100% sure what Winter's going to do yet either. I'm hearing from the different contractors that I've spoken to regarding the project in a whole, that now is the right time to do this work, and that the further we get into winter, the harder it becomes to execute it properly.
Right.
If it helps please the board, look, I've been involved with the camp since 1985. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. My kids both go to camp there. Certainly vested, only recently in this capacity as building the grounds and so on. But I can tell you firsthand that I'm committed, and we're committed to doing the right thing. And if that means, whether it's a walkthrough or Max, or, I'm happy to come meet you or whatever it is. If there's something that needs to be done, we'll make sure that it gets addressed. And if it helps you at least contemplate some sort of conditional approval, the work that we still have yet to do on Lakeside with the stepped hillside there, and some of that work along the lake's edge has yet to be done. Perhaps you conditional that work and say, okay, look, let's get the stream crossing, let's get this culvert, let's get all this stuff in and done so that we're protected from the winter, we're protected from further erosion and so on. But if you want to condition anything, condition us from proceeding with the bigger part of the project until after this board's been satisfied.
With all due respect, this board's been meeting virtually. We had one in face-to-face meeting. I think it was in July. You could have come back at any time prior. This has been going on for a really long time. Your predecessors said and made exact same promises, only to come to the next meeting right after that bulldozer went up the hill. So in my opinion, like I just need to understand a little bit more about what's going on with that mitigation. And I completely appreciate you want to get the work done. We want that work done as well. It's going to be an improvement, but we've had some history here, and I think we just really want to see some changes. We got some new management here, so let's just take a month, come back in December, come armed with the proper information, and it should be completed in December.
I think
you very much.
if we were to go take a look as quickly as possible, and we will, again, we are all volunteers, but if we can get out there in the next several days, and it looks like hay bales, whatever kind of preventive measures have been put in place, and were put in place way back when the issue first arose, so that those raw mud slopes have not been just washing down into that wetland for the past 2 years. It shows that you had good intent, and at least you tried, and but we're just completely in the dark at this point. So just give us a few days, and I think I agree 100% with Bob.
So just so you know, I live part-time up at camp. I'm Cheryl, still the camp director.
Mhm.
And I live right off of Horton Road, right on Horton Road in town, live here year round. If you let us know what is good for you, I will meet any of you at any point in time and we can work it out. Rich and Matt will tell you, we want to do the right thing. I cannot change what happened in the past. And I'm sorry, my predecessor strung things along. I cannot account for that. What I can tell you is we love camp. We want to move forward for the kids and the community and the wetlands and do the right thing because we are stewardship of the land we live on and we respect it. And we are happy to do whatever you need to move this forward because I really, really, really need to move it forward. And I thank you for any consideration you can give us.
Thank you, Cheryl. We'll move quickly. We'll coordinate with Max, and Max will be in touch with you. We'll get out there as quick as we can. Everybody agree?
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coos up on Justin's Way. Max, can you bring me up to speed on this? I thought I forget exactly where we settled on this. We were going to allow them to clear the grass and so on, just so they could get up there and show the property. Fill me in, please.
Yeah, I think Steve's on the call as well. But
Okay.
yeah, we issued.
Evening, everyone.
Hey, Steve.
We issued a permit for them to access the buildable area, or what the proposed buildable area was, as well as the proposed septic area, so they could dig test holes to give us a full site plan instead of just a plan for a driveway access that would go through a regulated wetland on the property that they would need to fill a small portion of. And I believe that there's a mitigation plan attached to that, the filling of that area to offset that impact. And I think the board was more comfortable looking at it from a whole perspective, where we understood that where the buildable area was going to be and where the proposed septic would be installed as well, before we move forward and just giving them driveway access to the property.
Right.
So I can then bring you up to date on where we are now.
Sure.
As you recall, back in April, we walked the site. So I think everyone saw that there is an existing traveled way there going up the hill to the development area up at the top of the hill. We had requested permission to finalize that driveway, to clear it and grade it, and install a culvert pipe under it at the area where the wetland crossing is. And at that time, it was thought that, as Max mentioned, let's get the septic testing done. Let's get a full site plan for the whole site put together so that we really get a better picture of what's going on the overall property. So subsequent to that, Max issued a permit for clearing some of the vegetation in that existing traveled way to allow access for a machine to get up there and do the septic testing. The septic testing was completed by Beatty and Watson.
early in the summer. A septic plan was designed and has been approved by the Putnam County Health Department. So the plan that you currently have before you that was recently submitted is that plan that shows the driveway through the wetland and buffer, as well as a location for a finalized design for the septic system and a location for a potential house further up the slope.
So the
As you
yellow
recall-
is the steep slopes,
let's see, yeah, yellow is steep, yellow is slopes 20% and greater.
and then the wetlands is that, where is the that little square at 590.9?
I don't have my, hold on, Mark, let me bring my plan up for myself here. 590 point, it's just below the 590.9.
Yeah.
You can see there's a flag 20B, 21B.
Yep.
19B, 22B. It's between 19
Right.
and 22B is the portion of the wetland that's proposed for.
Right.
And again, if you've been out there, you know that part of the wetland is already disturbed by the fact that the traveled way is already out there.
Yep.
So it's not currently really functioning as wetland. There's a small seep just to the south of the traveled way that we did delineate as wetland, and that's the part there that essentially gets cut off by the driveway.
Right, and that's where you put the pipe in?
And that's where there's an existing 12-inch and an additional 15-inch pipe will be put in there, just to
Okay.
maintain those flows through to the wetland, since we know that's at least one place where there's a point discharge of groundwater to the wetland. So we want to make sure that that's maintained.
Okay, so what are we looking at for as the conservation board? We're looking at that wetlands crossing, or when it doesn't seem like we're looking at any steep slopes. It's you're just touching upon steep slopes as
There's
you
a
look.
very, yes, exactly. There's just to the east of the wetland crossing, there's a small area of steep slopes there. You can see in the yellow, there's a little bit of grading. If you recall from being on the site, hold on, let me just shut my, there we go. If you recall from being on the site, that area to the south of the traveled way was cut in kind of sharply. The slope is pretty steep right there. So the plan really is to just kind of feather that back a little bit to make it not quite so steep. So there will be a little bit of grading in that 20% slope there, just to reduce the slope a little bit. So there wouldn't be erosion problems in the future.
All right, Max, I need your thoughts, because I know you were talking, there were a bunch of other sort of parameters being batted around when we were talking about this one.
Well, Steve, can you touch on the original, I guess, proposal where there was mitigation that was
Sure.
proposed for?
Yeah, Cheryl, if I can share my screen.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. All right, that's the plan Mark was just talking about. Here's the mitigation plan. Okay, so the areas that you see in blue there are the areas of the buffer that will be disturbed for the finalizing of the driveway. The area in yellow is the proposed wetland disturbance, which is about 1,200 square feet. The area in pink is an area we're proposing for a buffer and wetland restoration, including an invasive species maintenance and monitoring plan. There are details for that plan on this sheet. This sheet was submitted as part of the original application back in April. I didn't resubmit it this time because I know you guys all have it in your file. And then that purplish area to the right, just to the east, is an area where we're going to just a little bit of cutting back of the existing slope there to intercept some of that shallow surface water, shallow lateral flow through there, and replant that as wetland as well. And there's a note on the plan that shows the species that we would be using in that area. So that's about a 2-to-1 impact, a 2-to-1 mitigation for wetland loss, and approximately maybe a 1-to-1 for wetland and buffer as we go in and do some invasive species removal and restoration.
Thanks, Steve.
Originally, this was looked at back in 2003, 2004 by the planning board. There was some discussion about whether this lot, how access to this lot would be provided, whether it was viable to get up there. Originally, there was a private road entering off the cul-de-sac that went further up the slope. At the planning board's request, we narrowed that down to a driveway rather than a private driveway, rather than a shared road. The driveway was moved further to the south. It originally went through that area where you're looking at the pink. And it was moved further to the south just to get the narrowest portion of the wetland we could cross while still not getting up into that steep slopes. If you look at this, back to this drawing, you can see just south of us are the steeper slopes. So if we were to look at moving that driveway any further to the south, clearly we'd be in the 20 to 35% slopes. And considering that the driveway is already cut in there and established, it seems to us to make sense just to leave it where it is, have that minor wetland impact with some mitigation on a couple of different fronts, and leave the location of the driveway where it is.
Yep, agreed. I mean, I'd certainly like to see some treatment of the water coming down off the driveway at that point as you get down close to the wetland, but that's something to be discussed, I think, further on in the process. I don't know. What does everybody else think? What are we being asked to do, Steve? We're saying, giving our sort of tacit thumbs up to this lot and what you've done is acceptable so far, or what are we doing?
Well, I mean, I guess we're looking for feedback for you, from you. You know, we met the condition of going out and doing the testing and coming back with a formal site plan. We've reapplied. I think reapplied is the wrong word. We've provided new information just based on that new site plan to remind the board of what's been going on. We would like to get the driveway approved at this point and as soon as possible, make those improvements.
Mm-hmm. All right. What does everybody think?
I've lost my big screen and I can't figure out why. Anyway, I can still see y'all. No, there we go. Thank you, Cheryl. It was probably you helping me out.
What do you guys think? Well,
I mean,
I don't.
at this point, sorry, just to step in here for a second. I think at this point too, just to reiterate, if the board does approve a permit for this proposed site plan along with the mitigation plan, you know, if the property's sold in the future, that this is what the board would be approving. Steve, just to reiterate to the homeowner or the landowner that if changes were to be made to that plan, the new owner or the new developer or whomever would need to reapply if the site plan would be shifted in the future.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, Max. I think there's really no alternative to driveway location, and we now have an approved septic system at that approved location. It certainly wouldn't make sense, in my opinion, for someone now to go back and try to reinvent that septic system after they've gone through the process of getting it approved by the health department. The only thing that might change in the future is the location of not even the location, but the size and footprint of the proposed dwelling. You know, right now we're looking at a schematic of what a dwelling that would fit on the property at that location. An architect may come in and have some other idea, but certainly generally the location for the building would be where we're showing it on this plan.
So the only thing
that's outside of buffers and steep slopes. I don't know if we'd come back to you.
You know, Steve, I just have to, let me interrupt you right there. It's actually not outside the steep slopes. It's in the yellow, the back left corner of the house, the southwestern corner. So if we're approving,
Mark, let me find it right now.
Yep.
I see that. Yes, in the southern area there.
So I don't know how the board feels about that. Maybe we should be saying that is the one thing that we're pointing out we disagree with at this point. But other than that, I mean, I don't see any issues with it. I think the idea of, you know, the way they brought the driveway up does the best they can do. We did not get past the wetlands. Crystal, you were there. I remember we made it that far and it was impossible to go any further. So I have no idea of the condition of the existing roadway that went all the way up to the house site. I have no idea what it looks like right now.
Yeah, Mark, I think the existing driveway only got about as far as the edge of the wetland buffer. Everything beyond that would need to be still cut in at this point.
Right. So
then
tell me.
I'm wondering whether there should be a rough flagging of where the driveway would go and the house site, unless Steve wants to move the house. I guess it would be slightly north so that it's out of the steep slopes. I mean, we're looking at 5 feet, 10 feet, something like that.
It looks like just kind of simply rotating it a little bit on its axis.
Or rotating.
Just to get it seated on that.
Right.
Obviously, it wants to sit on that knob because that's going to be the best view from up there.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, is that something that we need to do now, or is that something that when someone finally comes in for a building permit that needs to be kept in mind so that, you know, they're aware that that could be an issue and they'd have to come back to the board if it
I
stays
think
in that
that
location?
your average builder or your average homeowner is going to just assume that there was no issue with being into the yellow, and they might just try to push it even further into the yellow. So it might be good if it's easy enough to redraw the house so it's out of the yellow, and maybe make a note that, you know, these are steep slopes, need to stay out of the steep slopes. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Okay. Mr.
Before
Coos,
you,
Mr.
before you
Coos
lose
is
the
on the
plan,
co-
sorry.
Yep, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, before you lose that plan, I just wanted to ask more about the septic, where the septic was. And that's obviously in the buffer, right?
No, the septic is outside of the buffer.
Septic is outside the
Yeah,
buffer.
the entire septic and reserve area are both outside of the buffer. If you look at looking at the plan there, just to the north, you can see that arc that forms that shows the buffer line.
And that, okay.
And
the
we're
trenches there are
we're
the
probably
septic.
15 to 20 feet south of the buffer with the septic area.
Max,
Both
have you
both
verified
the primary and the reserve?
have you verified the existence of any other wetlands on this site, or were you just going by that one little?
No, I've only looked at what was provided, the flag, what was indicated on the plan.
I mean, I think that should be noted also, unless, you know, we have a third party verification of what, that there are no other wetlands or issues going up that, where that road is shown. It might make sense now, just to make it easier for the applicant later on to do what Max said, and then flag the, you know, more or less location of the steep slopes and the driveway, and let's all walk it and done.
Yeah, I do have a question on the septic. Can you scroll up, Steve?
Yep.
So the piping for the septic is going through what I'm just guessing it's a class 2 steep slope.
The yellow is the 20 to 35%. I guess that's what you guys call class 2 steep slopes.
That's New York State class 2. So just a scroll up a tiny bit to the house, not all the way. I just need to see.
There's the tank.
So the tank is in steep slopes. I didn't think that was allowed in town code.
I don't
I'm
know
not sure what New
I'm not
York.
sure what town code allows. I know that the health department has approved it.
So the health department is allowing a septic tank. Scroll up a touch more, please. Keep going. Okay.
In
So
Putnam
what
County,
is-
Andy, you can't put the trenches themselves
Right,
in slopes
that I
greater
know.
than 15%.
Yeah, I know that. So then my question becomes, what's the closest that a septic tank can be put to a house in Putnam County code?
10 feet.
I believe that,
So then
that
the
was just gonna say
question
10 feet as well.
Okay, so the question is, why are we then putting a septic tank in a class 2 slope rather than putting it closer to the house?
These are good questions, Andy, and why
And,
not?
and then I'm going to ask another question, which is, wouldn't it almost make more sense to put the septic tank closer to the house, out of the steep slopes, to my, I'll call it screen right, and then try to do as much of the piping as possible, because it's gravity fed, along the driveway, so we're not disturbing anything.
Yep. Yep.
Yes, the run is a little bit longer, but it looks to me like you certainly have gravity on your side.
God's honest truth is, as a builder, I bet it's easier to put it down the road. I know we did one, as they dug the road surface, they just dug a trench down the middle and ran the pipe right along, well, the edge of it.
Yeah, and it's certainly easier to maintain if you have to over time.
And that steep slope is going to be, what do you think? It's sand? I'm thinking it's probably rock and big trees. So what's
Yeah,
going
it's rock. Yep.
Well, Mr. Coos is on this Zoom meeting, and I don't know, maybe he wants to weigh in on that question. I don't, not being the engineer, not having designed the system, I don't have an answer to that question. And maybe Mr. Coos has some knowledge he'd like to partake on that, if he wants to get involved in this discussion. Ralph, you there?
Well, while we wait for him, like in other cases where we were very near or in the buffer, we required the peat systems to be installed. I know that the Board of Health, has approved them even without that in many cases. But we often, when you're looking for an exceptional situation where it's, potential, in the buffer, right on the buffer, things like that, to try and put these peat systems in there. So just ask that be considered as well when Mr. Koo entertains the change over here with the piping.
I personally, I think a regular septic system is a lot less maintenance, and they've got it sitting in there. They're out of the buffer.
They're out of the buffer.
I agree with Andy. I'm surprised I didn't even notice it, but yeah, why are we running the pipe and putting the tanks all in the steep slope? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I can certainly check with Beatty and Watson and see what their thinking was on that. And if running it along the edge of the
Jason
driveway as you
Snyder.
put down.
Jason Snyder wants to be brought in.
Okay, Jason, he'll know the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second, sorry. Okay.
Ralph.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Oh, hang on. Okay, so the
There you are.
tanks, the septic tank and the dosing tank are in that particular location so as to provide basement sewer service and also maintain a maximum tank depth of 30 inches. So they need to be pushed out that far in order to have basement service. That's why it can't be close to the house. If the tanks were close to the house, they'd be 8 feet in the ground.
Right, but if you follow the topo line around that dark topo line, I can't see the number on it. You follow it around to where it meets the driveway, you're at the same height. 669.4, just uphill from that.
Okay, well, yeah, I think we have a retaining wall here along the driveway.
Right.
In order to maintain those slopes.
Yep.
And also, it's not great to have the sewer line underneath the driveway. We could look at changing it if it's absolutely necessary, but generally we just come straight out and away from driveways and retaining walls and all that. So certainly we can look at making a revision there, but honestly, as far as the location of the house goes,
yep.
The house was positioned before we did the slope analysis. We just tacked on the proposed house onto the end of the driveway, and that's where it wound up. So scooching it, the health department, if you scooch the house forward 5 feet or 10 feet, the health department isn't going to require a change. You can just do that. They're not going to want it. We don't need a revision from the health department. So if that needs to be done, we can just do it.
I don't think anybody's concerned about the revision from the health department. I think it's more a matter of what we're giving approval to. I don't want to say, I want to show that we're putting a house in the steep slope.
Okay, Steve can just scooch it forward and make a note.
And I think the question about the tank location, as Jason pointed out, it's for getting a basement sewer out, et cetera. That's really a temporary disturbance as well. Once you dig the hole, you put the tanks in, you set everything up, you backfill that slope and it's reseeded. And that's not really a permanent structure at the surface that may impact the steep slopes. So I'm not sure that that's a real concern, but if Jason can look at the issue, the question of possibly moving it somewhere so it's not in the 20% slope, we'll look into that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to run the effluent sewer down that slope anyways. I know.
It looks like you have grade going right down the driveway, Jace. I mean,
Yeah,
I,
Yeah, we could, well, we could run it down the driveway, certainly.
and I'm not saying under the driveway, because I completely agree with you. That's not the right place
Around
for
the
it.
shoulder, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that inside curve.
Yep.
And it's not entirely true that, you set it and forget it, right? Because these things need to be maintained, they need to be pumped, so
Yeah.
that'll
So-
be regularly disturbed.
We can have it, well, I mean, we have an access cover proposed at grade, so.
Well, it's gonna be a heck of a lot easier for the guy from the septic
Yeah.
truck to pump right off the driveway than have to drag his hose, 100 feet down into the woods. And also,
Well, and yeah, walking down a steep slope in the woods.
right? And also, digging, it's not like you're gonna get a trenching tool in there and be able to dig a surgical little 1 foot wide hole. You're gonna be with a machine, they're gonna be knocking trees down. They're gonna be doing a lot of disturbance on the steep slope. Certainly it can be done cleanly with a lot of care, but why go through all that trouble to, as a builder to have to do that? So you're disturbing the whole driveway already. You've got everything all set up.
I think we agree, Mark, that we will look into that for sure.
We'll move the tanks and sewer line.
Done.
Yeah.
Next.
Thank you.
Yep.
And you're gonna scooch the house out of the.
Scooch the house out of the yellow. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Next, do we still have enough strength left to do
I hope
new
so.
business? Arnaud, 5 Juniper? I'm gonna have to try to find that now. Sorry, folks.
So Mark, so I guess we're done, right, Mark?
Yeah, I think we're good. As far as I'm concerned, that was, those changes bring it within code, I think.
So then we'll bring it back in December with those changes made. Is that the plan
Everybody agree?
for our approval?
We all agree. Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you,
Thank you.
gentlemen, ladies, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, let's try to get 5 Juniper. Maybe we can get a quick kind of executive summary of what our issues are that we're supposed to be looking at.
Sure. So we have so basically what's going on here is we're tearing down the existing cottage, which is served by an existing drilled well and oh, you know what? Let me get my share screen. And here. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have an existing cottage to be torn down. We have the existing well to be abandoned, which is outside of the buffer, and basically we have this lawn area with a cess pit. So we're proposing to abandon this cess pit in the buffer, reclaim some of this existing lawn area with native wetland shrubs and various reclamation plantings. And we also have we're extending the driveway here for a turnaround in front of the house. And I'll bring up this is the existing plan, or this is the existing conditions plan.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this is the proposed plan. So we have we're extending this parking area here in front of the garage.
Yes, I don't think we're seeing it.
Oh, you don't see this one?
Same plan, yeah.
Sorry. So let's do this one. Okay, you see this one with the steep slopes on it?
Yep.
Okay.
How big is that house?
It is about 4,700 square feet.
Is that footprint or living space?
That's the footprint.
Wow.
He wanted to go build out instead of up because they're in the scenic protection overlay.
Got it.
So we wanted to mitigate some of the visual impacts and it's just one floor.
Keep the height down. Yep.
So we have this area here in front of the garage that we need to extend for at the end of the driveway.
Jace, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Which map is that? Just what's the label in the packet on the town website? Because I'm working from that, unfortunately.
This is sheet 2 of 4,
Grading and
site grading and drainage plan, yeah.
all right, that's better.
So let me, to give you, well, yeah, okay, we can go with this one. So this interior, so this is basically the area that we're looking to maintain or reclaim as, you know, with various wetland shrubs for the buffer mitigation, which is currently, I mean, this is really all open space. This whole area here is really just open space, meadow, but this is really like the lawn, kind of like the lawn main landscaped area here.
You know what, Jace, do me a favor.
So,
I'm having a little trouble getting my head around it. Can you just show us, bring us in the driveway? Where is the driveway? Down at the bottom?
Well, you know what? Let's do this. Let me get rid of this. I have another. Oh, you know what? I have another. I don't know how to share this screen here. All right. Anyways, so this is the existing gravel driveway. Do you see in here?
You're not sharing.
Oh.
Yeah.
How about now?
Nope. Oh, that's a beautiful view. Is that the view from up there? Oh my God.
No. Let me oh.
Yeah, I have that map open also. That's existing conditions, correct?
That's the so here's the existing driveway here. Do you see this?
Yep.
Yep.
So that's the existing driveway and it kind of ends right here. So we're just extending this. It's 250 square feet of gravel at the end of the driveway here.
Okay. And where are you crossing the wetlands buffer? That's that arc right at the end of the driveway is the wetlands buffer. I'm having a hard.
Correct.
And the wetland is what?
The wetland is the water course.
No, but where?
The wetland is the hat. Do you see the orange hatching?
That's all the wetland. That's
the wetland buffer.
That's the buffer. So the wetland is everything you've driven through coming through the driveway.
Correct. That's correct.
All right, I understand.
But you're also asking to build a house it's completely outside of the wetland buffer, just touching it.
That's correct. Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to see this. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just think we have to see the property.
I mean, I do have some pictures. I don't know if I'm gonna.
Well, you know what, Chase, we at this stage with these, we just like to give us an idea of what exactly is going on. Then we'll go do our usual site visit. We'll see you next month. So where is the septic proposed?
Well, the septic is proposed up in this area here.
Okay, so again, it's out of the buffer.
Out of the buffer.
All right. All right. Oh, okay. I see it on the other map. I've got it. Sewer effluent. Wetlands buffer. Boy, this is tight. You really got this squeezed right in here, huh?
Right. Yeah.
All right. If anybody else has any other questions, jump in now. Otherwise, I say, Max, will you set up a site visit? We'll get out and take a look. And in terms of flagging, do you have the wetlands buffer flagged and the proposed house perimeter flag?
The proposed house, garage, septic system is all staked.
All right. Okay.
The buffer is not staked.
I think it would be a good idea to have the buffer stake just so we can get a sense, at least, you know, every 100 feet or something. I know it's an arc, but just so we can know what the heck we're looking at.
I mean, the buffer extends right up to is right on the corner of the existing cottage. And then, I mean, there's points along here that we can reference.
And I mean, if you want,
I don't know that we're going to be able to get a survey crew out there in that amount of time to get all this staked, but there's certainly points along this that we can reference.
well, if you can do that and give us, you know, even with your own approximations, pull in existing stakes and give us a general idea that
I
you
can
know,
do that.
you're familiar with this thing. You've been working on this thing for months. This is the first time we're ever seeing this plan to walk into the middle of the woods. We don't know what the hell we're looking at. So
yeah, I mean, this is actually all open space. This is all meadow. It's all open space. But I'll get it flagged the best, or I'll get it staked the best I can.
All right, thanks, Jason. Anybody else have any other questions on that? All right. So Max, if you could set us up, we'll get out there. What's next?
Can we do Johnson quick?
Yeah,
Johnson
let's do a
Rinderman?
quick, just a quick overview of it, if you could. Let me pull the plan up. What's the best grading and drainage, and then which is the actual?
The sheet 1 of 2 would be the best.
Unfortunately, I'm going from the town website, which only doesn't list the sheet number, just the label. So it's grading and drainage, or
Grading and drainage, yeah.
All right, that's where I'm starting.
Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Again with the steep slopes on it.
Yep.
So just to recap, last July, the board gave us permission to go in and build the curtain drain for the septic system.
Oh, right.
I remember that.
Sure.
Is this the property near, what's the dam?
Yeah, it's
Just
at the end of
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
it's at the end of, it's at the very end of Mountain Brook Drive.
Where is Mountain, but I'm spacing, where's Mountain Brook Drive?
It is behind the country Inn, Country Motel,
Okay,
Country Hill Motel. Behind
Yep.
there, you go down behind Benchmark Auto.
yeah, I know, I know. Okay.
So this was one where you
Thank
found a lot of water in the area of the septic, and you were putting in a drainage pipe to see if you dry it out sufficiently. The results of that were that you were able to dry it out.
Everything worked out exactly as planned. We retested the area with the health department. They witnessed the testing. We designed a septic. The health department approved it. And so being that was successful, now we're back.
All right.
So
where's the wetlands buffer? That dark, my screen is enormous, but I still can't see it. I'm trying to enlarge it.
So again, the wetland buffer is the hatching. You got 100 feet from this stream over here, this regulated stream.
Okay.
And then we have the 100 feet from
the lake.
Yeah, and then we have 100 feet from this, and then we have 100, and then it extends out this intermittent stream here.
Wow, you are just jammed in there again, boy. Okay,
Yeah.
Got it.
So this is really, this is an old maintenance road here for the dam. I guess is what it was used for.
Yep.
So there's already a corridor down here, which we want to use in the proposed condition.
Yep.
And this is the path that we used, and we were given permission to use for construction of the contractor to construct the
right. I recall we asked you to move it slightly. I forget why. It was coming across. Yeah, I recall this is what we asked you to do. So everything flagged, same as the other one?
Yeah. Yep.
You have the buffer, the wetlands buffer is flagged, because pretty much it would be good to see the entire space that this whole thing is, what we're going to need to go get within, so we can just walk around the entire actual building site. And we can drive down that driveway with our vehicles? No,
we're gonna have to park at the end of Mountain Brook, and we can go down the Scenic Hudson property here. There's a trail here.
Okay.
An existing traveled way. I think that's the way we went before.
Right, right. That was the way you were proposing originally to go in, and we avoided that by going straight down the existing. Now I remember.
Yeah, they're not going to allow us to go down that road. So,
Right.
or we can go straight down this hill here, but this is much easier going down the existing dirt path. There's still 18, there's still 4-wheelers going down there, even though there's a gate up here now.
All right. So you'll be providing a little side by side for each one of us to drive down in?
Yeah, I can bring a 4-wheeler if you'd like. It's not going to be a side by side, but
all right. All right.
So is this another? So this is another. So we can do this all the same day. We can do both.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And all joking aside, if there's any possibility if it will make life easier to bring a machine to drive down there with, I will certainly bring the quad.
I mean, it's a nice walk. I mean, it's an okay walk.
Yeah, it doesn't look that far.
Yeah.
All right, good.
An okay walk.
If Jason, if you could just also flag the new access road, that would be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, that's rough. That's roughly flagged. Yeah. This whole way, and then once you get it back on the, really once you move down this down the cul-de-sac here, there's a straight run right down to the existing traveled way, and then it's an existing cleared corridor.
Okay.
So this is a pretty easy one too.
All right.
And all this, the septic, all this is all flagged. There is some clearing that was associated with, associated with the construction of the curtain drain, but it's all staked out. I staked it all out for the planning board to see. So.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Thank you.
This is another one. This is another one that's at the plan. These are both at the planning board for minor site plan approval.
All right. Very good. We'll get out and take a look.
Okay.
Not one, but 2 pools, Jason?
Right. There's a lap pool that is elevated and connects the 2 wings of the house, and this is more of a lap pool, and there's some other elements to the as a water feature, and then this is more of a standard swimming pool, I believe.
Wow.
I mean, we can go over I can show you the renderings. That, I mean, I know we're running tight for time, but we do have a set of renderings and all that I believe we submitted. I don't know if they were.
Yeah, I'm looking at
over all that at the site meeting and the position of all that.
I don't see renderings on what was submitted, or do I? No.
It's labeled house design, I believe.
Oh, yes, I see that. Oh, look at that. So it's a standard colonial, right? I can see that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's some house. That's beautiful. Okay.
And so hopefully we can schedule that when the owner who's also the architect is available, because I'm sure he would like to be involved with that. I forget what he returns, but we'll coordinate that with Max.
All right, I think that's all we need. Anybody else have any questions?
Just what that space is up there where it says it's cantilevered over the wetlands in that corner there.
So yeah, so that's correct. And that area there of the house there's a green roof over a lot of this house. So the footprint of the structure is outside of the buffer, but he does have the second floor cantilevered over the buffer, and there is a green roof associated with much of this north wing of the house.
Well, I guess what I would say is remember what James did with the other house. So, and remember how that was. I don't know if you listened in, if the applicants at all listened in on that whole conversation, but
yeah,
that is now being looked upon favorably. So.
Okay.
All right. Very
Great.
good. Thank you, Jason. Thanks you,
a lot.
Everybody else. I think we actually made it through it. The only other thing I see on the agenda is stormwater, which Max, I assume there's nothing of any major consequence, or tell us.
No new updates on stormwater.
All right. So if that's okay, but unless anybody has any other comments, I would like to. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I have one little thing. So Cheryl had answered me about the formal request about Hudson Highlands Reserve, that Max had sent a memo to the planning board, but did we ever get a response from the planning board? I know Steve Gaba responded about Shakespeare, but have we heard anything back from them about Hudson Highlands Reserve?
Max, I think you should take that.
Yeah, I mean, there no official response in a memo format, but in their meeting, I think Steve was not of the opinion that we had jurisdiction anymore over the project, which I thought we were trying to get around by sending that back out to the planning board, essentially.
We never had jurisdiction. They were the lead agency always on this.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's
No,
the
I agree.
first conservation subdivision in the town.
And the
So
conservation
how is it that when they
needs to be
change the
involved.
plan, we're not seeing it?
Exactly.
Right. And I told Jason spoke about this earlier today, and even if this wasn't a conservation subdivision, it's still in the open space overlay and would still be a referral to our board anyway. So
That's absolutely right.
yeah.
And at the
So,
planning, go ahead, Max.
No, I was saying it just makes it that much more of a valid point.
Yeah, at the
essentially.
planning board I listened to, it was like Steve Gaba, his comment was, and I'm paraphrasing, well, you made a positive declaration under CEQA. They've come back with changes that appear to satisfy what you want. So there's no reason you would have to go to any other boards. And that's not my understanding of the CEQA process whatsoever.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Frankly,
Well,
it really
if
is
any of you-
unbelievable.
I mean, if you want me to write a note, I mean, if I understand what we're saying to Steve Gaba, the conservation board is requesting that it come back to them because one, the importance that it's the first, conservation subdivision, and two, because it's in the open space overlay, and get his response. Is that something you all, think would be useful? Because obviously I'm aware as the first conservation subdivision, it's an incredibly important project.
Yeah, there were a lot of technical issues that were the studies that they were referring to. They kept going back to saying, see, this study from like 50 years ago is what's driving our designs. The 700 feet back from the lighted area versus 100 feet. There was all this discussion about fragmentation of the forest, about the proximity to the pond. I mean, it went on. They argued about how animals would never go down that steep hill, down to Clove Creek. And it was clear they were utterly wrong. And they came back and they supposedly have addressed all those issues. They have not addressed anything. In fact, the fragmentation is just as bad as it ever was. It looks like a standard subdivision. If I took a pencil and just said, okay, here's a subdivision, that's what it would look like. It's absurd.
The other issue that's really, I think, central to this, Jason, beyond kind of 1 and 2 that you mentioned, the third thing is there have been substantive changes to the plan overall. So what we originally saw is not what it is now, what it is today. So it's been, they've taken out the equestrian center, but they've reshuffled where they're putting houses now. They have not removed houses other than I think the 1 or 2 that are around the little pond area, that little lake area. And I think they have a new egress that they've, so it's like a new plan that we've never actually seen. It's never been presented to us, and it's still being dressed up as a conservation subdivision.
Well,
I'm sorry, Jace, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask because I wasn't, I wasn't sitting on the conservation board when it first came in front. I mean, obviously it's such a big, important project that I would be in favor of it coming back to the conservation board. Is anybody though willing to, because I don't have my full grasp of it, like to draft those 3 points? I mean, I would be happy to send them to Steve Gaba, based on us, these are the reasons why we think the project should come back to the conservation board, just as an extra nudge besides the conversations that Max is having. If
Absolutely. I mean, if you, MJ, you remember, we're talking about 10, 12 years ago. When they first introduced the idea, right? When they first introduced the idea of what a conservation subdivision was. And I think,
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm thinking Saunders Farm was the example. And they show where they clustered everything towards the road. They protected the sides. They brought, the whole back was left all wild. They had paths coming through to show how they were connecting, letting the wildlife come through, allowing trails to continue through, and everything was clustered at the front. You know, and that was like the put up as this is what it should look. This is the concept. This is the idea. When you put that next to this, there's no relevance. This thing, there was no, it's not even close to just the general idea. And never mind when you get down to the specifics. I think it would be a useful thing to maybe, I mean, I don't know how we do this because I certainly can't do it, but to take this piece of property and draw on it what we think would be a conservation subdivision. Show that big, connection through the center where the forest continues through and not chopping the thing in half. Don't scatter the houses all over it. I don't know. I'm just so frustrated with it.
But if you recall, Mark, we had these conversations. When
Yep.
they came before us, we said, this is, I mean, you're kind of, you're jumping through loophole after loophole in this, and you're not, I mean, we know you're doing that, it's like, it was obvious, and it's blatantly not the spirit
Right.
of the code.
And Jason, to answer your question, I think between all of us, we can write down a few points that, are the high points, but the idea that it wouldn't come back to us because we've already commented, just because we commented didn't mean we signed off on it. We commented. Now it's your job to change your plan to address the comments. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. I thought, does Gavin work for the town or?
He works for the town. He's the town attorney under contract, not an employee. But where I'm uncomfortable is I don't believe it is Steve Gaba's position to be a gatekeeper.
That's right.
It is his position to advise somebody if we shouldn't be involved because there's something inappropriate, but he shouldn't be a gatekeeper. And I question, did we even distribute the last comments we put together in the last, whatever it was, 4-6 weeks, if it was that, did it go to Steve Gaba or did it just go to the planning board?
Question. And who was it that was from the Hudson Islands Land Trust? Who's the director? Shouldn't she write a letter that addressed a whole bunch of points that we kept going back?
Yes. She wrote an incredible letter.
Katrina Schindeldecker has done that recently too. She wrote a new set.
The new one.
A new memo.
If all we do is jump on the back of that and say, this says everything we're trying to say in the most scientific, succinct terms, we don't need to add anything to it. We just all sign that letter and send it to whoever we need to send it to. I don't know.
To Andy's point, so I'm obviously new to this. Andy, to your point, the town council should not be the gatekeeper. Who is in the normal sense, would the conservation board request the planning board that this project come back to them? What is supposed to be the chain of command?
That's a good.
The planning board normally decides whether they need to send it to us, but GABA can advise them on legalese whether or not they should be doing it, or if they really should be doing it. I thought, no?
Yeah, I still go back to where I'm uncomfortable because Neil Zuckerman brought it up. We have comments from the conservation board and Steve Gaba just shut it down. And a CEQA is an ongoing process, particularly when a positive declaration is made.
Yeah, I find what Gaba did bizarre and inappropriate, frankly.
So without putting more work and extending this to, I know we all want to get on, if our main question is such an important project is there's been substantive changes to the plan since the conservation board saw it, related to housing location and egress. It's the first time it's a conservation subdivision, which is incredibly important, yada yada. And we I send this to Steve, Gaba, and Neil, I mean, what's the, and CCing Mark? I mean, what's the, saying that, the Conservation Board, for these reasons, believes this project should come back to us, what's the way forward? Is that the way to go here? I mean,
Can I ask a question? Would we have had to issue a permit on this project for any part of it?
Ultimately, a wetlands permit possibly.
So if that is still the case, then it's a moot point. Of course, it's got to come back to us because we're not going to issue the permit unless it
But
does.
remember, if the planning board is lead agency, they can issue those permits without consulting us. They
Wow.
can do that.
Okay. Well, there you have it.
They used to not want to do that. They used to want to always have us involved and get our input, which is why I'm kind of puzzled by the reaction.
No, but wait, that was when we were CAC, an advisory council. When we became a board, weren't we given the ultimate permitting authority of anything that was under our jurisdiction?
I think when it's a subdivision like this, they have a lead agency and they can do it. That needs to be checked, but I do think that they get that, they get that power if they're the lead agency. I mean, as we know, the town board can be lead agency on a subdivision of this size and nature. They could take it from the planning board and then call in whoever they want.
I mean, we ultimately they'll issue a permit, but they may be able to set the conditions of that permit, essentially. We would, like, I guess for the cell tower, for example, right? That was recently approved a couple of years ago. So that got, at our permit, that they appealed our decision, went to the town board. The town board, went into litigation with them, and then eventually we ended up issuing a wetlands permit based on the results of that. The back and forth between the town board and their legal counsel.
But our power was overridden, right, as a conservation board.
Eventually, I think that was due to the fact that they appealed our decision, and then the town board took jurisdiction at that point. So I think ultimately, if we needed to issue permits, they would have to, even if a seeker determination was provided, they would need to come back for permits from us. If they appealed our conditions or our decision to provide them a permit, then the town board would take jurisdiction on our and look at why we decided to deny the permits. So I think that ultimately the town, that's the way that the code reads. Is ultimately, if we deny a permit, they can appeal, and then the town board becomes the deciding board, and they have to present to the town board.
So I guess what it comes back to is for what do we provide Jason with to go back to the planning board with?
Yeah, I think all the points you just stated, I think he just should say, you could even, I don't know if it's appropriate for Mark, Jason, and myself, Ron, or whoever else wants to be involved, but to have a conference call with Steve to just understand why his perspective was the way it was.
Shouldn't Neil be involved in that, Max?
Yeah,
too?
yeah.
I think Neil needs to be on that call.
Should we just do this as here's a quick advice from the Conservation Board. I can either do it as the town board liaison, as a new board, kind of asking clarifying questions, more like, the Conservation Board, expressed that they'd like to see this project came back a number of, for these reasons. We believe there's going to be a wetlands permit needed and that it will have to come back to us eventually. Is that, and just, is that the case? Get some clarifying questions. I mean, is that the right approach for right now? And then take it a step further after that. And I can go back and forth with whoever, Mark, Max, MJ, if you want, I could send you a draft of that very brief clarifying email to go to Gaba and Neil and CCing Mark before I send it out. And we'll just start with some clarifying questions before going forward from there.
Yep. That sounds
Makes
good.
sense. Jason, did you see the memo that we had put together? I don't know what it was, 4-6 weeks ago. You might know. I think we should send that to Jason because it lays out that and from the land trust, Katrina's I mean, because they're very much in parallel. I think you should look at both of those, and I think it'll make it very clear for you what our
Okay.
concerns are.
Andy, can you find those easy enough and send them back to
I can
Jason?
send them. I can
Cheryl?
send them.
Excellent.
You have them, Cheryl? Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just draft a very brief email. And before I send it out to anybody outside of the Conservation Board, I'll send it to Mark and Max and whoever else wants to give some feedback. And then we'll go forward from there in the next few days.
Thank
That'd
you,
be
Jason.
great.
My vote would be send it to the whole board. I think we'd all be interested in looking at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for remembering, MJ.
I'm gonna send a reference out that I found last time. I forgot to send it out before, but it talks about that if there's no penalty for failing to identify an involved agency, meaning like, that we should be involved, even though they're the lead agency. But it says that we could then petition grounds to nullify whatever decisions they make as well. So we have some kind of, avenues here as well to go back and say, hey, you didn't involve us, so I'll send this reference out as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds ugly.
Well, I'm just saying,
Yeah, no, thanks for looking that up.
All right. Have you all had enough?
Yes.
Well, I think
I've been up since
at
6
least
o'clock
for-
on meetings.
one more
Do I have a
point
motion to
on-
adjourn?
Hey, Mark, just
Yo.
one more quick point. On Steve's, I don't know if you all read Steve's memo in regards to the Shakespeare Festival
Yes.
regarding so we do have land use jurisdiction. We do have jurisdiction over land use changes on that project. So, and he and I spoke briefly about that memo and it wasn't corrected. So I think I'll respond back with a memo from this board saying that, obviously wetland permits will be required for the Snake Hill Road access to the property itself, that the changes that they're proposing there. The memo he stated back to us, it made it sound like we weren't going to require permitting, which their consultants have obviously stated that they're aware that it will be required as well. So I think that I'll draft that and you can take a look at it, but that would be the next step there for that project.
Cool.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you.
Thanks for catching that.
All right. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Good night, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Good night.
Giving.
Right.